A young superstar, unfortunately, is done for the year. Trade talks are heating up for the Lakers and the Suns and the Heat and the Hawks, supposedly. Plus, we'll give you a little bit of on-off split. All that and more on Locked On NBA.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On NBA, your daily source for all things NBA from the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making this your first listen. We appreciate you guys being a part of the show and our community. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code LOCKEDON. That's prizepicks.com, promo code LOCKEDON. I'm Matt Moore. I'm senior NBA writer for the Action Network, co-host of Locked On Nuggets. He's David Ramil, co-host of Locked On Heat. And David, we're going to talk about a number of things. Tonight we're going to talk about an unfortunate injury that's going to keep a young superstar out for the season. We're going to give you the on-off split in the third segment where David gives you something off-court he's been thinking about, and I give you something on-court I've been thinking about. And we'll start by breaking down the latest in NBA trade talks. Shams Charania, as he's wont to do, dropped the Monday edition of his latest intel around the league. And there's a lot of interesting tidbits in it. We can start with the headline because, well, they generate a lot of SEO traffic, David, and that's the Los Angeles Lakers, who are interested in Bojan Bogdanovic. Bojan Bogdanovic. Sorry. I get them. I use still. Even after all this time, I do get them confused. The Detroit Pistons guard, who was traded for the Utah Jazz as part of their money moving and repositioning and trying to, really kind of rebuild the team, even though they're still okay on the floor. Bogdanovic has been great for the Pistons. I hope a deal gets done for him with someone, because you watch Bogdanovic with Detroit and you're like, he's too good to be on this team. He knows what he's doing and he's really competent and he could really help. A couple of interesting things about this, but what was your initial reaction when you heard the Lakers were interested in adding what it done for a minimum investment?
Well, I mean, it makes a lot of sense, right? I think the talk has been that with Davis playing as well as he has been near MVP type level, LeBron still being a strong player as always, that the need is to acquire as much talent as possible. That right now the surrounding cast isn't particularly good, even with Russell Westbrook playing decently off the bench. There's just a talent deficit there, and they see themselves as legitimate because of AD's strong performances over the course of the season, and so why not capitalize on that? So it made a lot of sense. I don't think this is surprising. The link to Bogdanovic hasn't been one that I'd seen before, so I was perhaps a little surprised at that, but I know they've been looking to acquire some more talent than currently on the roster. And it does make a lot of sense surrounding LeBron James in particular with another shooter, a guy who can put the ball down, another veteran who can create off the dribble as well. And you're right about Bogdanovic. He's been fantastic. Having seen him torch Miami for 24 points in the second half, just catching fire just a week ago. He's obviously been a very, very strong player for them, and I like his fit almost anywhere. I think 29 other teams could probably use, 28 if you don't count Utah, could probably use a scorer off the bench like that.
It was kind of interesting in that so Bogdanovic always has these big performances versus the Lakers, and this was reported by Tim_NBA on Twitter, who says that he confirmed this, and he's been covering the Lakers for a little bit of a time. The Lakers don't have a pro scouting department right now, supposedly.
Yep.
You said he confirmed that? I want to follow up on that. That's crazy. But he also noted that basically it makes sense. Everybody that has a big game versus the Lakers eventually gets linked to them in trade talks, which is really kind of hilarious. It does note, the story notes that the Pistons are reluctant to move him. So this is yet another incidence of a very clearly clutch sourced report of the Lakers are interested in trading for a player, and the team being like, well, that's great, but we don't really want to move him. They want him as far as a veteran. Now, I think he'd be of more use to a team that's actually trying to win now, but he has provided a lot of leadership. He balances that thing well, and it seems like the Pistons really kind of want to keep him.
Yeah, I thought when they signed him to an extension earlier this year? Wasn't that kind of like an indicator that no matter how bad they might be this season, that they still wanted to surround Cade Cunningham, whoever they get in the upcoming draft, and some of those other young players with more proven veteran? Again, a guy in the locker room who has that kind of experience, who provides that kind of leadership. Those roles are still essential even in today's NBA. So, yeah, I'm not sure what Detroit's purpose would be to move him, because at some point, we've had this conversation before. When it comes to young rebuilding teams, you need to start filling out those roles sooner rather than later. You have to have some kind of purpose, or else you'll just be floating aimlessly for seasons and seasons, and that doesn't necessarily help your young players develop until you start actually playing for something that matters. And the acquisition of Bogdanovic seemed like a trend in that direction, as this was the contract extension. So I don't know why they would trade him. I mean, from everything I've heard from Pistons people, it seems like they want him on the team. They want to keep him on that group because of what he provides. So, the Lakers are always a fun team to talk about, because everybody's been linked to the Lakers at one point or another, whether you're a superstar or even a great role player. You're bound to wind up in the purple and gold. But from the Detroit's perspective, I just don't see why they would trade him anywhere.
The other names associated with the report are Cam Reddish and Evan Fournier, kind of honestly a little bit of a step down there in terms of production they can bring. Maybe the more relevant news as far as like the title picture goes is word of continuing talks for Jae Crowder. This is a deal I had heard about. Like, this was making the rounds 2 weeks ago. Like, this was out there. Everyone was kind of discussing it. Nobody had gotten the details on it to report it. Shams got the details, and the talks were Crowder goes to Milwaukee, $4 second-round draft picks, along with players. I would tell you that probably them,
Right.
and possibly George Hill. They go to Houston, and Eric Gordon and or Kenyon Martin Jr., who's been really good for them, to Phoenix. The holdup in the potential three-teamer, according to Shams, and this is what I heard as well, was that the Rockets are coveting 1 first-round pick for Gordon, and for Martin, a very good first-rounder, not a batch of second-rounders. The understanding, I think, was like Houston was like, yeah, we could definitely do a deal for draft compensation. And then they got like, hey, how about some seconds? And we're like, nope, no deal. Now, I will say, Gambano down in Phoenix, who is pretty plugged in on these things, he says that this was not, like, he denies that this was a thing. That this was, I am just saying that everybody around the league thought it was. So who knows? Maybe it was just suggested by the Bucks or the Suns in an effort to go ahead and put pressure on something, but it is kind of interesting in that, Houston reportedly turned down the deal, and that makes sense. Like, Houston, the consensus has been that Houston is going to keep saying, if we just wait, we can get a first rounder for Eric Gordon right until the morning, the day that Eric Gordon signed somewhere else in free agency. Like, they've waited so long on this, and Gordon's value is kind of deteriorating. I think that the key question here, though, from a non-inside baseball or inside basketball, I guess, standpoint here, David, is let's talk about the Bucks here. What would getting Jae Crowder, if it meant losing some of that guard depth, how would you feel about them making that move?
Yeah, I don't really see the point, to be 100% honest with you. I mean, I know it gives you a little bit of versatility if Brook Lopez winds up getting hurt or winds up getting into foul trouble. You need that depth to some perspective. I understand Bobby Portis Jr. probably not playing as well this season as he has in years past, but again, Chris Middleton coming back from injury, so you lose something there. You could plug Crowder at the 3 or 4. But I think I mentioned on this show, and I can't recall exactly when, maybe you weren't hosting on that particular day, but I think the idea of Crowder is always one that's better than the actuality of Crowder. And this coming from somebody that watched him thrive in Miami for half a season here. And, there's the potential for him to shoot well from the perimeter. He can guard well on occasion, but those things aren't always sustainable. Like, he was on fire in the Orlando bubble through the first couple, series in the Miami playoff run. And then he tapered off significantly. And then he was gone in free agency for a huge amount of money. And look, Miami is interested in acquiring Jae Crowder, but they're also not even willing to trade anything for Jae Crowder. For them, for that perspective, the Miami front office is like, look, if he gets bought out, we'll be happy to bring him back. It won't cost us anything. And we've got an open roster spot. We'll add Jay because he's a great culture fit, because he's already got experience playing alongside Jimmy and Bam, etc. They have the positional need, and they're still not willing to trade for him. So I just... Again, the idea of Crowder is a great one because he's a 3-and-D player. He's a great, versatile wing. He's experienced. He always wins wherever he goes. But he's also getting older. He's not a consistent producer from the 3-point line, and he doesn't do much else. He doesn't pass the ball. He can't put the ball down. So I just don't see it. From Milwaukee's perspective, you're a contender, right? You want to be able to shore up any weaknesses you have in your front court. That makes sense. You want to add whatever depth possible, even if you're not playing a lot of minutes. Like you look at PJ Tucker, a guy who's provided great value last year in Miami, and he's a fine player in Philadelphia. And he didn't even wind up playing much in their title run a couple of seasons ago. So maybe that's just the kind of thought process behind trying to acquire a guy like Crowder. It's like, well, we'd rather him come to our team rather than him join any of our competitors in the Eastern Conference. I've heard him linked to Miami again, Philadelphia, Atlanta, and others. So maybe that's the perspective there. But I don't know. I just don't think it's also that great a move that's going to swing you from a really, really great team right now, as currently constructed, to an even better team.
I really like it because they sacrificed a lot of their wing depth when they traded for Serge Ibaka, presumably because they wanted another big to throw at Embiid, which doesn't make any sense. Ibaka is not going to do anything versus Embiid except pick up fouls, which that's fine, but you can do that without sacrificing your wing depth. They needed wings. They needed him last year versus since they traded him in the regular season. Like, they need wings. And so having Crowder, they can play either forward spot. You can slot him in at the 3 next to Giannis and Brook Lopez. When you move Giannis to 5, you can slide Jay down into the 4 spot. Having that versatility that can switch, I think, is important for them. Is it an inconsistent shooter? Absolutely. Much like the rest of the Milwaukee Bucks. I get the move for it. So we'll see if anything does, in fact, come of it. Maybe the last thing is John Collins is mentioned in here again.
Wow, surprise.
It's just I'm begging the Atlanta Hawks to trade John Collins. I'm begging. I'm so tired of like deal because I hear it all the time. It's like, yeah, the Hawks are looking at trading. At this point, I'm like, yeah, okay, all right. The water's wet, sky's blue. I get it. The Hawks are looking to trade John Collins. It's interesting. I can't figure whether the Hawks are coming or going, and we'll see kind of what they figure out. Let's take a break, and when we come back, we've got some unfortunate news to talk about when it comes to a young superstar who is unfortunately done for the season. We'll do that when we come back on Locked On NBA. First, I need to tell you about PrizePicks. So PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. It's absolutely phenomenal. You get so many different options. There's so many sports that they have. They've got women's college basketball. How about soccer? WNBA? How about esports? NASCAR? Nothing better than DFS NASCAR. Tennis, MMA, boxing, disc golf, Eurobasket, as well as, of course, NBA, NFL, MLB, NHL, PGA, and college football. All these types of things. You pick 2 to 6 players, and if they're going to score more or less than their projections, you're not going up against everybody else that's got the screens full of models and projections and playing 500 lineups. It's just you versus the projections, and you can win up to 25 times your money on any entry. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's just that easy. And they offer safe and fast withdrawals. They're currently operational in over 30 states and Canada. Download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code LOCKEDON. Don't forget to enter promo code LOCKEDON at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. We'll be right back on Locked On NBA. Back here on Locked On NBA, thanks for joining us and making us part of your day. Make your second listen Locked On Sports Today. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today, available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get podcasts. Back here on Locked On NBA with David Ramil. You can follow him on Twitter at DRamil13. David, the Pistons were the subject of some real tough news on Monday as Adrian Wojnarowski first reported what had been feared for some time, and that is Cade Cunningham is going to require season-ending surgery on his shin. He's got a stress fracture. It is a tough injury that you can't really wait for it to heal. They're going to go ahead and have surgery. He's going to be back for next season's training camp, but Cade Cunningham is done for this season. What's your reaction to the news?
Yeah, it's horrible because you just want to see him continue to thrive. You want to see him continue to grow. And look, the Pistons, another one of those tough teams to watch because they've been perpetually rebuilding, and it seems like they have a star-level player in Cunningham. who is a good contributor. And I can already hear people in Houston criticizing me for my take on Cunningham and not my equal level of support for Jalen Green, but that's a whole other conversation. I like Cunningham. I think he's a versatile type player, a guy who can make plays for others. And yes, his offense is definitely a work in progress, but at the same time, I like his fit there and the potential for that team. It seems like it's a well-assembled group. Again, they have a player like Bogdanovic who is being coveted as a trade asset, and I think they had the right players there, the right combination of youth and some veteran leadership there. I know there was some crazy talk maybe about them competing for a playoff spot this season. Obviously, they're 7-20 now, not likely to get in a playoff spot. But at the same time, the tough loss there. Look, it makes sense, right? You're not competing for anything this season. On the whole, as bad as I feel about Cunningham being lost for the season, it has to help the rest of the young players in that Pistons roster, right? You get a little bit more experience. Your rookie Jaden Ivey gets to play a little bit. Killian Hayes gets to play a little bit more. He's been providing some punch for them of late. I know he had struggled to start the season, but he's been playing much better. So it just seems like now when he does return next year, now all of a sudden maybe you'll be a much better group, much more cohesive, and you can realistically start to even add in the draft this year, maybe even sign somebody in free agency and bolster your chances so that you can start improving the potential of garnering a playoff spot next season. What about your thoughts on Cunningham's loss?
Whenever a player has to go through surgery, whenever he suffers this, I always try and make sure that I'm cognizant of that. Not only is this like a person, right? It's a human being, but
of course
we just gloss over what's involved, right? Like we see these guys nightly and we watch them compete. And they lived a certain version of themselves, lives in the public spotlight, and people connect with it. And that person has to go through surgery, and that means all the scariness that comes with any surgery, even if it's minor or routine. Right. And then there's a recovery. There's all of the rehab, and that's just to recover from the injury. And then you got to start doing your basketball rehab, and then you got to get back in shape, and you got to worry about all the setbacks, and you got to learn to trust your body again. This stuff is really, I think it's lower T trauma, right? It's not trauma on the level of the most horrific incidents that happen in day-to-day life, but it is trauma. And we've seen that impact players. We've seen players talk about it. We've seen players talk about the depression they go through when they're away from the game that they love that much. And so those are always the first things I try and be mindful of when these injuries occur. I think from a basketball standpoint, it's fine. You're going to tank. This is a great draft year. What if you get let's say you don't get number one and you don't get Victor, but you do get Nick Smith out of Arkansas, or you get Amin Thompson. This draft is definitely build top 2, but 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 are all guys that the smart draft people I talk to say are going to be impact players and likely borderline all-stars. This is a very loaded draft. They won't all be, but there will be a lot of hits in that top 10 as far as really good players. This is a loaded draft. So good opportunity to add some more talent. And in the meantime, you do get Killian Hayes that has been able to take this opportunity and work through his struggles. He looked so lost to start the season. And being able to have these minutes and have a longer leash and work through these problems has really helped him. You get to play Jaden Ivey, and Jaden Ivey doesn't have to learn how to play next to Cade Cunningham in his first season. He gets to be the player that he wants to be, the firebug that scores so much. You get to work on all these things. Now, some of the other players, I think they probably don't benefit from this. Isaiah Stewart would have really benefited from another full season next to Cade because of what Cade brings to the table in terms of playmaking and setting the table. Same thing for Marvin Bagley, who's trying to get his career on track. Same thing for Jalen Duren, who's a really promising young center. So the bigs probably struggle a little bit with this. It'll be interesting to see what they do at the trade deadline, not only with Bogdanovic, but with guys like Alec Burks, who's also movable and is a veteran that can help teams and things like that. But in reality, Detroit was probably going to be a bottom 5 team anyway. It's unfortunate. You never want to see a player go through this, and you lose a year of the chemistry, but at least it does give you a year of pure evaluation while you're positioning for a very good draft. So for the Pistons, it's not the worst outcome in the world. You just hope that Cade's able to get back on track and able to pick up his career up right where he left off next season.
What do you think they should do at the trade deadline? Do you think they should trade Bogdanovic because of his salary, because of his age? Maybe on paper it doesn't seem like a great fit because he's older and because, he's not necessarily one dimensional, but I mean, he just doesn't seem to fit the same timeline as the rest of the youth movement in that roster. But what do you think they should do?
I get it from the perspective of if you're trying to be like, we're going to get, like, let's say they got Victor, right? You got Victor and you got Cade, and then you have Bogdanovic, which means you're not leaning on a young guy like Sadiq Bey. You're not leaning on a young guy like Jaden Ivey. I get it from that perspective. I just look at it. I think a lot of the difference is how far probably Troy Weaver of the Pistons thinks that they are and how far I think they are. And I think that they're much further away. I think you can probably, if you have veterans on the roster, you want veterans that don't need to play. Like you need veterans on the roster that are just like Mike Muscala's. You need veterans on the rosters that are like Udonis Haslem is like an extreme version of this, right? But like you need guys that are okay being in that mentor role. Because I've learned this from covering the league. A lot of times guys don't want, like, they're not ready to be mentors. That's not where they're at in their careers. They don't want to be asked to be like, hey, we need you to be like, not like, basically be like the youth chaperone, for these teams on these field trips. Like a lot of guys are like, no, I've still got years left. I want to compete. And so you need to have those conversations with them. And I just think you can get good draft equity. I think these players are useful and they are helpful. And if you get pieces that will help you get other significant parts later, I think that's more important. I think you always got to have some veterans around, but I also think that there are always opportunities to add those guys because those are ironically usually the guys that, the contenders are willing to maybe move either for money or because they don't have minutes for them. And so I think there's other kind of paths to take there.
Yeah, I mean, they've got Corey Joseph on the roster. He fits that role pretty perfectly already.
Yeah, another one. All right, let's take a break. We'll come back and we're going to do a little on-off splits, our segment where David picks something off court that he's been thinking about recently, and I take something on court that's been rattling around my brain. We'll do that when we come back on Locked On NBA. But first, I've got to tell you about BetOnline. BetOnline is your number one source for sports betting info and stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from pro and college football and bowl season to basketball and even the World Cup at betonline.net. If you love sports podcasts, you can even find those at BetOnline as well. We're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. We'll be right back on Locked On NBA. Back here on Locked On NBA, want to let you know, as we're recording this on Monday night, Damian Lillard does have 11 threes versus the Minnesota Timberwolves. Does not look like he's going to re-enter the game with 6 minutes to go, but there's a very good possibility if he does that he's going to wind up breaking or at least have a shot at tying Klay Thompson for a three-point record. So Damian Lillard is absolutely back. All right, we're going to do the on-off split now. So this is our segment weekly where David takes something off court that he's been thinking about and gives you his thoughts on it. And then I give you something on court that I've been thinking about. David, why don't you get us started with the off court section of the on-off split?
Well, I wanted to talk about it last week, but we never got a chance because we had a pretty full slate that night. But it had been reported the weekend prior that boxer Floyd Mayweather was looking to put in an offer to buy an NBA team. And I've got a problem with that because obviously, Mayweather's career has been marred by some out of the ring instances. He's been noted for some homophobic comments, some domestic violence issues, and things of that sort. And like you look at a team that's being sold right now in Phoenix, right? And reportedly a $3 billion offer on the table to buy the Suns with some other business people and things of that sort. Another group put together to buy that group. But when you look at what Mayweather and his troubled history, that's not what the NBA needs. And I think the NBA needs to start, put their money where their money is, so to speak. It's not just about making sure that they say the right things, but also enforcing it and making sure that they have the kind of people that can set an example. This isn't the 1950s. You can't have your owners be open racists and make comments about their players in smoke-filled boardrooms and things of that sort and not have it be leaked anywhere. This is a world where there is social media, where there is accountability. And that's the way it should be. This is evolution, right? I mean, we're only taking a step back in terms of accepting National Socialism. But other than that, we should be progressing away from that kind of thing. We should be realizing that those kinds of things are bad. And so the NBA, a group, a company, a multi-billion-dollar corporation that sees themselves as being aware of social justice issues, aware of the need to protect the individual and things of that sort, cannot get rid of Robert Sarver and then say, Floyd, you're the kind of owner we want. Now, at the same time, I do understand and certainly appreciate a need for a much more diverse ownership group. You definitely want to have minority representation among that minority group, aside from just Michael Jeffrey Jordan. So I can understand why they might be open to somebody like Floyd, but not Floyd himself. That's where the problem is, that he is not the right kind of person to own an NBA team, because you do want to set a positive example. You can't get rid of a guy like Sarver and then open the door for somebody else with that kind of troubled history, because at some point he's going to be asked to be held accountable for his mistakes in the past. He's going to have to be a vocal leader in that front office. He's going to have to make press conferences, and I don't know he's the kind of representative that the NBA really wants to put out into the public eye that way. So that's just something that I've been thinking about over the last couple of weeks. What do you think, man?
I think it's hard to find people with money that are not problematic at this point. That's a good point. I think that the players would be very interested in Money Mayweather being an owner. And I wonder about that.
That's problematic too.
As part of the player empowerment era, I think that there is a constructive, dedicated, and intention by the players to push for there to be more black athlete allies in positions of power across the NBA landscape. And I think for them, Mayweather represents that, because Mayweather is, like, many of them have either an appreciation or I don't know what celebrity friendships can really be called, but a celebrity friendship with Mayweather. There's a number of players, and some that even might surprise you, given some of his comments and track record, that are they are big fans of Mayweather. So I think ultimately at the end of the day, I don't think that it's worth spending a lot of time worrying about unless discussions get super serious. I think it's an idea that's been floated, but until it actually occurs, I'm going to be a little bit skeptical, mostly, honestly, ironically, because the other owners, I think, would view him as a threat and would not want him involved. And so I agree with you. I think it would be a problematic addition to the NBA ownership group. But that would obviously, I don't think, be the reason why the other owners might object to it. They would have other objections. So we'll see how it kind of works out. The on-court split for this week is going to be about, for the love of God, helping on corner threes. For the love of everything holy, please stop over-helping on corner threes. Scoring is up in the NBA, and that's great. Everybody loves the big scoring lines. It's cool to see guys going off for this. It's cool to see the scoring up. I like defense, but it's cool. It's fine. The game is in a really good place, and it's hard to defend. I'm not arguing that this is easy. It is definitely difficult. I asked a veteran, why is this happening so much? Like, why do guys leave the corner so much to overhelp to the other side, whether it's on ISO drives or in pick and roll or whatever? Like, why does this happen? And the answer was stupid. The player was just pretty straightforward. It's just like, this is not something that's super difficult to contain. It's just a matter of discipline. Most guys don't have it because they think they're going to make a play on the inside. Sometimes the intention is good, where players are genuinely like, hey, I'm supposed to help my guys out. I don't want to leave them on an island. Leaving open that corner three, like, I get it from the perspective of, if a guy's got a wide open layup, I get it. Like, it's tough. Like, a wide open layup is a higher percentage shot than a corner three. But so many of these games and momentum and shifts and runs seem to be decided by a team's ability to over and over and over again generate corner three-pointers by one player on the weak side being like, I'm going to come over all the way into the paint to help my guys. Oh, no, they reversed the ball. This league has some of the best passing it has ever seen.
Yep.
The guys are on target, and they're athletic, and they're tall, and they can jump pass, and they can reverse it, and they know how to get to that corner spot in the pocket for a guy to hit it, and it's programmed into almost every single offense. If you just focused on giving up corner threes, even if you gave up more layups, I do think ultimately, just in terms of the flow of the game, it would help you more. Like, this is something that really, if you want to know who the best teams in the league are, look at the teams that are able to successfully manage this. The Bucks have invested a lot in their defense and not overhelping, because it was killing them last year. They were overhelping so much, and that was for all of their good work and how good they are at the point of attack and how physical they are and how big they are. They were still getting beat because they would overhelp and leave open these corner threes. Got to shut that down, and it's really helped them this season. So there's these teams that I watch nightly. The Nuggets are one of them, but there's a lot of them. The Timberwolves are another, where there's just got to be better discipline in not over helping. It's okay to help, but these teams have got to contain those, because otherwise we're just going to continue to see these offenses completely run amok.
Well said. I notice it in Miami all the time. Tyler Hero, probably the most egregious, is one of the poor defenders. Him, Max Strus, Duncan Robinson. These are guys that are well known on the Miami side of things for not playing smart defense, to your point. Like, they'll try hard, they'll play earnestly, but at the same time, they will make copious mistakes. And yes, you're right, they do make that same mistake over and over again. Tyler can be out on an island there, guarding somebody from the three, and then for some reason, somebody kind of, sticks a foot into the paint, and he starts helping over, and then all of a sudden swings the ball over to a wide open corner shot, and that's where all of a sudden your momentum is killed, and you allow another team to start creeping up. I think they had a 19-point lead. You talk about defense. Well, I don't know if it was good defense or just really bad offense, but they held the Indiana Pacers to 82 points. They only scored 87 points, so a pretty ugly 1980-style basketball slugfest out there. And yet nobody could get an open look, and so it wasn't that problematic today, but it has been in the past, and it's a good point. I hadn't really noticed how much it happens over the course of a game, but you're right. It is a huge momentum shift, because you think that you're playing good defense. You're trying. You're right. You're being a good teammate. And yet it could absolutely derail any of your chances of holding on to a lead there. So, interesting perspective.
We're wrapping up for Locked On NBA for Tuesday. Thanks for joining us. If you are interested in hearing more about the games for Monday night, in particular, this really fascinating Clippers-Celtics game that's going on, and you want the reaction, whether the Celtics are able to get back on track as they're down 14 as we record this podcast right now, check out Game to Game. It's the best way for you to catch up on all the nightly efforts from the National Basketball Association. Check out the Game to Game pod in this same feed, and they'll get you caught up on all the games from Monday night. For David Ramil, you can find him on Twitter at DRamil13. I'm Matt Moore. You can find me on Twitter at HP Basketball. Thanks for joining us. Tomorrow, you got Jake Madison, John Corrales back with you. Make sure to keep it here all throughout the week for the best coverage of the NBA on Locked On NBA.